After a day of fevered speculation, the Prime Minister finally put MPs out of their misery, pulling the trigger and calling a general election. Announcing the big day, Rishi Sunak insisted he'd work to restore economic stability and bring mortgage rates down, and promised to fight for every vote in the next few weeks.
I will fight for every vote. I will earn your trust, and I will prove to you that only a Conservative government led by me will not put our hard-earned economic stability at risk, can restore pride and confidence in our country, and with a clear plan and bold action will deliver a secure future for you, your family and our United Kingdom.
So a 6-week march to the big day. We can expect plenty of political fireworks on the way. The polls suggest that the Conservatives face an uphill battle. Will it end in the dampest of squibs for the party? Well, Douglas Ross is leader of the Scottish Conservatives. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Gary.
Was yesterday brave or foolhardy?
Well, we've obviously known there was going to be an election coming this year. The Prime Minister has now announced it's going to be on the 4th of July, and I'm delighted to get out and about across the country to give the message to people that Scottish Conservatives will take the fight to the SNP, beat the Nationalists in crucial seats up and down Scotland, and get the focus back on what people have been telling me in the doorstep for months, that they want their governments to be focused on. It's about improving our education system, investing in the NHS. It's about growing our economy, creating good jobs. But they know that in crucial seats, it's going to be a very close fight between the Scottish Conservatives and the SNP. If they back the Scottish Conservatives, their priorities will be at the forefront. If they back the Nationalists, it'll be about independence. John Swinney said last night, independence will be page 1, line 1 of the Nationalist manifesto.
The reality is the Prime Minister called this election because things are not going to improve for your party over the course of the next 6 months, are they?
Well, every party has been urging the Prime Minister to call the election. He's now done that. We're going to the country on the 4th of July. And in the next 6 weeks, I'll be out with my candidates up and down the country who are taking the fight to the SNP in these key seats because they know the local priorities in their constituencies, our candidates up and down Scotland, and they know that voters are fed up with John Swinney and the SNP's obsession with independence.
The Prime Minister had 5 points on a plan that he said at the beginning of last year, 2023, he would deliver. How's he done on those?
Well, you know, he's gone through some of them. I think he said already this morning, he has not, seen a reduction in NHS waiting times in England as he had hoped. But
and he hasn't stopped the boats, and the economy didn't really grow very much last year. Debt has gone up.
Gary, on one of them, the one you haven't mentioned yet, to have inflation, obviously. The UK government has more than halved inflation, but here in Scotland, we've got our own priorities as Scottish Conservatives about crucial infrastructure. So I want to see that investment in the A9 and the A96 promised by the SNP over their 17 years.
These are not matters for this election, Mr. Ross.
Oh, they are, Gary, they are.
Well, they may well be in your mind, but they're not matters that no matter how you vote in this election, that the MPs you return to Westminster will change, are they?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Our Scottish Conservative candidates in the North East will be campaigning for improvements to the A9 and the A96, as I have done as an MP in my...
And if they get elected and go to Westminster, how will they change the funding for both of those roads?
Well, they will be speaking about these issues. They will be putting them at the top of the platform that they are standing on to get to Westminster and MPs, including dealing with issues. As an MP, I know that one of the biggest issues that comes through my mailbox is about our NHS in Scotland. We, as Scottish Conservatives, want to recruit 1,000 extra GPs, deliver faster access to GPs. We know people are struggling to get appointments. We know people are on waiting lists.
Again, an issue that has devolved to the Scottish Government. So again, the candidates who are elected to Westminster will have no influence over that.
Well, they do, because they are representatives in their local community, and what you'll get with a Scottish Conservative MP is a champion for your local area. What you'll get with a Nationalist MP is someone obsessed with independence. Just yesterday, John Swinney said in his reset moment in the Scottish Parliament that independence will be at the heart of his government, and then he said last night it's going to be at the very beginning of his manifesto. So Nationalists will focus on independence, the Scottish Conservatives will focus on the issues that really matter to people.
And the UK-wide Conservatives will focus on immigration. Are you looking forward to flights taking off to Rwanda?
Well, we've got to do something to stop the boats, Gary. We've had this discussion many times.
Because that's another area, of course, where the Prime Minister has failed in his pledge.
There are far too many people taking that dangerous journey across the channel, and many of them dying on their way across. So I want to see everything done to stop people taking that dangerous journey and to prevent the people smugglers making huge profits out of the despair many people are in taking that journey.
The Prime Minister said yesterday migration is being weaponised by hostile states to threaten the integrity of our borders. What does that mean?
Well, obviously, one of the biggest roles for the government is to protect our borders, and we have seen issues with people making illegal crossings that the government has been trying to tackle.
But these are people who are fleeing, perhaps, war
France.
or
France.
So France is weaponising, and they're a hostile state, are they? And they're weaponising this to threaten the integrity of our borders.
No, Gary, you are saying where they're coming from. They are, on the whole, coming from France.
No, but I'm very curious about what the Prime Minister meant. What do you take this to mean? Migration is being weaponised by hostile states to threaten the integrity of our borders. Which hostile states are weaponising migration to threaten our borders?
Well, what we are seeing is large numbers of people making that crossing from France into the United Kingdom. They are people of all nationalities, but there are also people smugglers and people traffickers who are making huge amounts of money out of the misery of people making that crossing. And anything that can be done to deter people from putting their own lives at risk to make that dangerous crossing and coming here illegally has to be done and has to be looked at. Indeed, we heard just this week, Gary, when the Prime Minister was in Europe, other European nations looking at similar proposals to stop this issue.
You've mentioned independence a couple of times. We know that the SNP's position is, if they win a majority of seats at this election, they will begin negotiations for Scottish independence. As a Democrat, would the Conservatives be in favour of talking to the SNP about this, engaging with them?
No, we want the SNP to stop talking about this and focus on the things that really matter to people. We had...
But if they win a majority of seats, can we not take it that that is what matters to people? And do you not have a democratic duty to engage?
Well, I'm going to be working over the next 6 weeks to stop the SNP winning seats, because we know in key battles up and down the country, indeed we heard it on your programme earlier on today, it could be a very close fight between the Scottish Conservatives and the SNP. I'm urging voters in these key seats to unite behind the Scottish Conservatives so we can stop the Nationalists getting elected, to stop their obsession with independence, put the decade of division that we've had since 2014 behind us and get the focus onto the issues that really matter to people in Scotland. That's improving their NHS, raising educational standards, creating good jobs in Scotland. This is a positive message I'm going to be taking to people up and down the country over the next 6 weeks.
I'm sure we will speak again. Douglas Ross, leader of the Scottish Conservatives. Thank you.
It's 14 minutes past 8 now, and the First Minister has said that the timing of this election is the latest act of disrespect and proof that Scotland features low in Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's political calculations, because, of course, our school holidays will have already begun by then. The SNP will be doing their own calculations this morning, how to maximise the return on the 57 seats, which will be up for grabs. They currently have 43 seats. Here's what some voters thought on the streets of Scotland yesterday.
Kind of indifferent, if I'm being perfectly honest. I mean, how many Prime Ministers have we been through in the past 3 years?
I suppose we're all a bit fed up with it. There's been a lot of changes in leaderships, both at Westminster and at Holyrood. So I guess it is time to give the voters a say.
I've only just literally found out, so yeah, I'll be researching my information before I vote this time.
I've no confidence in any of them.
I would welcome a general election. The sooner the better.
I don't think the school holidays make much of a difference.
Well, it is what it is, really, isn't it? It has to be a date, so why not that date?
Just everybody says things, they promise you the world and they do nothing.
I'm new in the country and I don't know how long or what time do they mostly do the general elections, but it's good to have a say for the people.
Well, let's hear from the leader of the SNP, John Swinney, now. Good morning to you, Mr Swinney. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Laura.
Did the announcement of this general election take you by surprise?
Yes, I think the time... Obviously, we expected there to be an election sometime during this year, but I think all the signals were it was going to be likely to be in the autumn, but the fact that it's going to be now in the next 6 weeks is welcome, and it gives us the opportunity to take our message to the people of Scotland that Westminster Government has given us austerity, Brexit and the cost of living crisis, and independence would give us the power to take our own decisions, like rejoining the EU, ending austerity and supporting those in need. And Scotland will only become independent if people vote SNP.
And we heard there one of our ladies in the Vox box was saying it has to be a date. Why not that date? You have a bit of an issue with it.
All I'm pointing out is that I don't really think the arrangements in Scotland for the school holidays have really been anywhere near the calculations made by the Prime Minister. But what that means...
Would you expect them to be?
Well, I think it would be respectful if that was the case, but it's pretty typical of the lack of respect shown to Scotland that we're an afterthought from the Westminster establishment, and particularly the Conservative establishment. But what it means is that people who are going to be on holiday at the start of the school holidays in late June, early July, have got to arrange a postal vote so that they can exercise their vote and be participants in our democracy. So that's got to be put in place pretty quickly by folks, and my campaign teams around the country will be making that point in all of our election activity.
So it's not that much of a problem then, really?
Well, there's a couple of problems here, Laura. One is the fact that people are going to have to arrange postal votes, so they have to think ahead. And I've had too many occasions over my long political career where I've gone to somebody's door and they've said, "Oh yeah, Mr. Swinney, I'm going to vote for you." And I say, "Well, that's great. I hope you're going to turn out in the day." And they say, "Well, actually, I'm going to be on holiday and I don't have a postal vote sorted out." So people have got to get on with that now if they want to vote in the election. And secondly, there's a big change coming because people are going to have to produce photographic ID to be able to vote. It's another attempt by the Conservatives to suppress voting participation.
Well, if they can manage to get away on holiday, then they might have a passport.
Yeah, but
so
but you've still got to do, well, we had a case just the other week there where Boris Johnson, the author of the voter ID requirements, turned up to vote and he didn't have his voter ID. So people have just got to be organised to vote, and that's what we'll be concentrating on as we take our positive message to the country.
You'll be hoping that your SNP voters aren't as disorganised as Mr Johnson then. Never mind them. Is the SNP ready? Do you have all your candidates vetted and in place in all 57 constituencies?
All our candidates are in place, and I'm delighted that they are. Our manifesto is well advanced. All our messages are in place for the election, and of course we've got fresh leadership to take us through the election campaign and to make sure we do as well as we possibly can do in this election, and that's exactly what I'm going to be starting doing today.
You managed to avoid the expense of a leadership campaign, but in terms of an election campaign, they often cost upwards of, £1 million. How are you going to pay for that?
We'll obviously have to raise money from our supporters, and we'll be doing that to make sure we've got a well-funded election campaign. We've got a huge amount
in 6 weeks?
Yeah, of course.
It starts next. It starts now.
Well, exactly, and we'll be getting on with that, and that's what election campaigns are about. You roll your sleeves up and you get on and you do it, and you drive that, and I lead it from the front, and that's exactly what I'm going to be doing in the course of today and over the next 6 weeks.
The most recent figures that I've seen suggests the SNP's made a loss of £800,000 and has another 200,000 of liabilities. So you're already down at £1 million?
Well, listen, Laura, don't you worry about the money. We'll find the money to fight the election campaign. We'll get on with that. We've got well-funded campaigns around the country, and we'll be raising money to make sure we fight a strong and enthusiastic election campaign, which is about the fact that Scotland's future has been damaged by decisions taken in Westminster, and the only way we can counter that, the only way we can end the austerity that's been culling our public services, the only way we can overturn Brexit, which is damaging our economy, the only way we can support people getting out of the cost of living crisis is by having the power of independence to change the lives of people in Scotland. And Scotland will only become independent if people vote SNP.
You told me never mind the money, that you would deal with that, but you were in Parliament just yesterday talking about the fact that you were going to put the economy front and centre in terms of Scotland. So will you be arguing about the cost of living crisis, or will it be independence at the top of your manifesto?
Well, you see, these things are all interlinked, Laura, because the cost of living crisis has been imposed on Scotland because of folly and foolishness at Westminster. Remember the mini budget from Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng? That has put up the interest rates and the mortgage rates of householders in Scotland. It fueled inflation. The Conservatives might brag about inflation being down to 2%, but inflation was over 10%. That has inflicted huge economic damage on the country, in addition to Brexit and austerity. These are all the products of Westminster. So
you want independence? Is it still page 1, line 1 on the manifesto?
Well, of course it is, because it's the answer to all of those issues. It's the answer to austerity. It's the answer to the cost of living crisis. It's the answer to Brexit. Independence is the way for Scotland to get over these errors and damaging decisions that have been inflicted upon us by Westminster. So, of course they're interlinked. Of course they'll be central to our election campaign, because that's the way in which we can chart a different course to the damage inflicted by Westminster.
In October, the special conference decided that if the SNP wins a majority of seats in the general election, the Scottish Government would then be empowered to begin negotiations with a UK government to give democratic effect to Scotland becoming independent. Who exactly would you be negotiating with? Because we've spoken to both Labour and the Conservatives, and they've both said that they would not begin negotiations on this with you.
Well, that's not a very democratic point of view, is it? That's ignoring the preference of the voters.
So how do you follow up then with your promise to independent supporting voters?
My point is that let's not just skip past the democratic outrage that the people of Scotland are having their views ignored by Westminster. That is not an appropriate way for a democracy to behave. So what I want to make sure is that the SNP gets the requisite support we need to take that argument to the UK government and to pursue Scotland's interests. That's what I'm interested in doing. We'll only be able to do that if the SNP gets a big vote and wins a large number of seats in this election. So that's what I'm going to be concentrating on and saying to people, if they want a better future than the one delivered by Westminster, and what Westminster has delivered for us is Brexit, austerity and the cost of living crisis, they've got to vote SNP, because the only way Scotland advances, and history tells us this, the only way Scotland advances is when people vote SNP.
John Swinney, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning. I dare say we will speak again before this campaign is out. SNP leader John Swinney there.